Hello, Wildcats. Welcome to our Wellness Wednesday video. Today's topic is conflict at home. And the reason that we chose this topic is because right now that we're all stuck at home, we are interacting with our family way more than we usually do, and we are in a confined space. So we might find ourselves in more conflict than usual. So we wanted to give you all some tips to how to handle this in the best way possible.
And our Wellness Wednesday quote for this week is by Thomas Crum. And the quote is, "The quality of our lives depends not on whether or not we have conflicts, but how we respond to them."
Thank you, Mr. Way. So today we're going to be covering what is conflict and what does conflict look like? Is conflict bad? And how do I handle conflict?
So we are going to start out with a little video here. Cute video. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this slide here about what is conflict. And so what we saw in the video was two different animals, a moose and a bear, that were in conflict. And so basically a simple definition of conflict is two people with differing views or opinions, and there's usually a negative action that happens and then what comes from that. And so this is kind of a cool circle that I saw online that relates to conflict that I wanted to explain a little bit. So basically, it starts out with a relationship, so between two people usually, and this could be a relationship, someone that you go to school with, it could be a relationship like a family member, and basically from that relationship, there is an event. And so an example might be that a brother or a sister takes something that's not theirs, maybe a piece of clothing, and they're wearing a piece of clothing that's not theirs. And so that's the event. And then basically what comes from that event is an emotion. And so that's something that happens inside of you. So usually the first thing is kind of what's going on inside and how you're feeling. when your brother or sister or sibling maybe takes that piece of clothing that doesn't belong to them. The next part of the circle here is an assumption. So why you think the event happened. And so a lot of times we assume that the person did this thing to us to be mean to us or because they don't like us. And so instead of getting more information, we assume something, and then that leads to a reaction. So what you did in response to that conflict. And so this is really the what I think important part about conflict mediation or resolution is understanding that we can learn to choose how we react to something. We can learn that we could maybe follow up and get more information before we react. And the way we react is usually how that relationship is affected moving forward. So the way we react determines the outcome, and then in turn circles back to that relationship. So a lot of times when relationships have conflicts and those conflicts are properly handled and we overcome some of those conflicts, then those relationships are a lot stronger. And so as you're at home with your family, locked in maybe close quarters with everybody, we hope that you know that these are relationships that will last a long time, hopefully, so we want them to be healthy relationships. So we don't want these conflicts to have long lasting negative effects. And so hopefully we can show you guys how to handle these conflicts better.
Thank you, Mr. Way. I'm going to be talking a little bit about how you can handle conflicts when they arise. Like Mr. Way said, it's super important that we learn how to handle conflict in the best way possible, because in the way that we handle it, it'll really affect our relationships. So it could either help our relationships or hurt our relationships. And so one of the most important things about handling conflict is communication. It is really important that when you are upset with someone or when you are not agreeing with someone, that you're able to communicate in the best way possible, which means to have agreements that you're not going to use bad words toward each other and that you're not going to put each other down or blame each other. The key to communication is not only what you say, but being a good listener. So being willing to listen to the other person when they are upset and being able to really get your point across and also be heard. So those are super important. It's also important to wait for the right time. And so, how do you know if it's the right time to handle the conflict then and there? Some people want to resolve it right away, but what we recommend is that if you notice that the argument is getting really heated and you're getting angry, you start using bad words toward each other or are starting to get really mean, that you take a physical break away from each other. So what that would look like is, like, if you are arguing with someone and you're seeing that it's starting to escalate, then maybe you say, you know what, right now I think we need to take a break and we need to walk away. And maybe someone goes into the other room and the other person goes outside for a little bit and calm themselves down. It is super important that when you're handling conflict that you do it in a calm manner, because if you try to resolve something when you're angry, it doesn't always go the right way, okay? And when you are communicating your points of view with the other person, remember to use your I statements. So when we're angry, we tend to place blame on other people, and that is not helpful at all, because the moment that you blame someone else, they stop listening, because then they get very defensive and then they're just going to start thinking about, what am I going to say to counter this argument, and you don't want to argue. You want to use I statements and just be open about how you're feeling, right? So for example, I feel frustrated when you take my Xbox away. What I need is you give me a couple more warnings before you take it away, right? So that could be a good way to use your I statements instead of just blaming and getting mad. I'd like to talk about some scenarios. We reached out to all of the students to get some ideas about what kind of things are going on at home and what kind of conflicts you're all experiencing. And so the first scenario that was submitted to us from an anonymous person is, it is hard to focus on my schoolwork and my parents get mad that I haven't finished my assignments. So we've been hearing this a lot, actually, that there's a lot of conflict between students and their parents because parents are pressuring them to do work, and maybe students want, you guys want to spend more time playing video games or on your phone, and so you're not being as productive as you probably should be. And so some tips for handling that conflict is, once again, using communication with your parents. So listen to them, right? So hear them out, and then let them hear you out and try to come up with an agreement for homework, right? Because homework is important. So it's determining what will work for you. So maybe asking your parents, well, what do I need to do in order to gain some more freedom and to be able to play video games? That it's going to be important to figure out what's going to work for everybody, and it's going to take a lot of communication in that. Okay, so then Mr. Wei is going to introduce our next scenario.
So this is another scenario we received from a student. It says, my siblings have been annoying me and we have been arguing over who gets to use the TV and video games. So I can imagine that this is something that already is difficult. You know, sometimes certain students get maybe a gaming system or an electronic device for a present, and they just assume that it's theirs to be used all the time and no one else can use it. But you know, I do encourage all the students to share, even if it is something that's yours. And so one thing I would mention to this student is, like Miss Lacona mentioned, is waiting for the right timing. You know, we've been kind of in this quarantine for, I think, 6 weeks now, and it's going to be another. We won't be going back to school for a little bit, as far as we know. And so I would encourage you to kind of play the long game with your family members. And waiting for the right time might mean that you let your brother or sister use the video game for now, and then when it's a better time for you to come to them and say, hey, you know, I'm feeling like you're kind of taking advantage of this, or you're using it an unfair amount of time, and then discussing what it would look like to be fair, right? Because fair is different to everybody. And so your brother might think that fair means he gets to use it 50% of the time and you get to use it 50% of the time, when you might feel that since it was your present, that you should get to use it more than him, you know? So just coming to a shared agreement with your siblings is important. And, you know, I will say that, like I mentioned earlier, these relationships, these family members, these are something that they're going to be here for a long, long time. And so we want to love and have compassion on our family members, and build up those relationships. And so sometimes these things seem like a big deal, like sharing these, but in the scheme of things, it's more important to just be open with the things that you've been given. Okay, so we do have a cool activity that we're doing in the counseling department. We got a cool little printer that prints these cute little photos. So this is one of me and Miss Lacona, and it says RMS Counseling. And this was a picture we took at the school. So basically what we want you to do is, if you have a friend that maybe you're missing or you care about, or you want to give them a note and a picture, we want you to email us. And what me and Miss Lacona do is we will print out your note and we will print out your picture on this little printer that we got, and then we will mail it to your friend. So we're not going to give you their address or anything, but we will do that. We'll mail it to them, so they'll get something in the mail from you. And so if you want to participate in that, all you have to do is email me or Miss Lacona your friend's name, and then your message, and then a picture that you want included. And the picture is also a sticker, which is kind of cool as well. So if you have any questions, you can email us as well about that. But we're really excited to start giving you guys opportunities to communicate with your friends in other ways.
Yay, I'm so excited to see those pictures. Remember that we are available. Please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. We know that these are tough times, and know that we are here anytime you want to chat, you know, and if you are concerned about any of your friends, you can let us know, because it's so important at this time to reach out in any way possible, especially for anyone who may be having a harder time right now. And so thank you so much for watching.
All right. Bye, everybody. Have a good week.